Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today is Wendy Darling. Wendy Darling is the author of the new book, Create Your Miraculous Life. It's Never Too Late. You can find out more about Wendy Darling and her wonderful work at her website, wendydarling.com. Welcome, Wendy Darling.
Thanks, Catherine. Great to be with you.
So, Wendy Darling, what does it actually mean to create a miraculous life?
Yeah, it's really, first of all, it's very individualized. It's very personal to what somebody might interpret as a miraculous life. And to me, it's a life that you feel is rich and fulfilling, and you feel that you are able to make progress in and accomplish things that matter to you. And so it doesn't have to be the waters parting kind of miracles, but it's the little things that add up that make such a significant difference. But it is the opportunity to be living a life that you were designed to live and destined for.
Now, a spiritual book called A Course in Miracles describes a miracle as a shift in our perception. What is your definition of a miracle?
A miracle is anything that could be unexpected, something that you wished for, prayed for, that occurs. A miracle could be even recognizing that your heart's beating 24/7, your lungs are working so you can breathe. And so there's a whole wide variety. I love the quote by Albert Einstein. And he stated that there are two ways to look at life. Either nothing is a miracle or everything is a miracle. So I happen to live in that second definition.
Okay. And when we look at everything as a miracle, how does that change how we look at everything?
Yeah, especially now with a lot of people going through more challenging times or uncertain times, it can be a little bit of a stretch to imagine what you're saying, that I can have a miraculous life. Even in my own life, people that I've worked with, this is the shift that needs to happen. And so it becomes really important to look at what is it that you really want? What do you want to be experiencing? Because it is first an inner shift to go back to a place of believing what might be possible. You know what's possible because you have desires in your heart. Maybe you haven't recognized them for a while. Maybe you have. But those desires, in my belief system, were planted in you so that you actually, it's like a carrot dangling in front of you, so that you grow and evolve and you make that special mark that you and only you can provide to the world.
Right. And I talk about how you're already a VIP. You're already a vibrational interference pattern. So your energy is unique to you. And once you recognize at a deep soul level, and I talk about this in my book, Reading the Soul, once you recognize that there's no one ever been created exactly like you, and you're here to be you and to give the gifts that only you can give, then you realize you actually are important. You matter. Your very essence matters.
Absolutely. You know, actually, my very first business name, not my first, but one of my business names was Thumbprint International for exactly what you're talking about. I believe, just like our thumbprint, like you said, there's no other person just like you. And that's our job in life, is to figure out what those gifts are and develop the skills necessary to make your unique contribution and mark. And one of the tricky things that I found, possibly you as well, is a lot of people don't realize what their gifts are. And so, because it's such a natural part of who you are, you don't want me to be your tech expert, but there are things I can do different than other people. And so I think that that becomes really important to, and so if you don't know what your gifts are, start asking people around you. They've noticed things.
Absolutely. And in my books, I talk about the way your soul communicates with you. And that's a beginning. Now let's talk, Wendy Darling, about what you talk about as divine destiny. So what actually is our divine destiny?
I believe, again, kind of guiding to what we were just talking about, is we have possibilities, that different ways that we can contribute. You know, there's a lot of people talking about our life's purpose. And I think a lot of people get caught up in, what is it? Is it just one thing? And it's not. It's really just looking for ways in my world that you can live the life of your dreams while still making your special mark and contribution. And I believe that that's part of our job in life at this time in our lives, that we not only want to be giving for us or providing for us individually. And I still believe, you know, I want you to be living the life of your dreams, but as a reward for making your special contribution. And when I say special contribution, I'm not necessarily talking about that everybody's going to be an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos or president of the United States. It could be how you make a difference in your family or with friends or in your community. You know, there's, again, unlimited possibilities, but we experience deep fulfillment when we are finding that place where we can contribute.
Well said, Wendy Darling. And, you know, there are three ways to be happy in life. The first way is physical pleasure. So this is sex, this is eating, this is ecstatic movement. Then there's what I call soul satisfaction, and that's going to be unique to each of us. So for one person, it might be watching NFL football on Sunday afternoon with their buddies. For somebody else, it might be knitting socks for the homeless or walking in nature. But one of the most profound ways to be happy in life is with life meaning, which is by making these contributions that you're talking about, where you know that you're making a difference. So that's what I'm hearing you say is your divine destiny, is finding what you and you alone can do, or maybe you and others can do together to make a difference.
Exactly.
Now, Wendy Darling, in the past year, we have seen some of the greatest disruptions in our lives our generation has ever seen. Millions of people all over the world have gotten sick. Many people have lost loved ones to COVID-19. People have had to change jobs, gone through unemployment. They had to support their children through online learning and faced untold financial stress. And I know that Oxfam talks about how this is not only a pandemic, but has set back even famine and poverty all over the world. How can times of turmoil motivate us to make changes in our lives?
Well, I think that anytime that we are going through hard times, there can be an opportunity. I know that when I wrote my book, we were in the middle of a pandemic. I also had some things personally going on where my son became very ill, yet I was feeling this pull to write my book. And so I want you to know my life was not feeling miraculous. So I literally had to live what I put in the book, meaning I had to dig deep. You know, my son was hospitalized and struggling, and I'm like, really? You want me to write a book about creating a miraculous life? It's like, how do I get myself in these places? And so I have a lot of compassion for that. But I think there's always the opportunity, even in the early stages of the pandemic, when we were all wondering, what the heck was this? How is this going to play out? Just lots of questions. I always take a step back, and it's like, what might be the opportunity? And I think if every person just takes a step back, and it's a time of assessment, it's a time of, a lot of people have been reflecting, learning, hey, what really matters most? I don't know anybody in my sphere that, we missed just seeing each other in person or hugging each other. The first time I hugged one of my friends, I didn't think I was going to let go for a long time. And so it really gives us an opportunity. And so then the challenge is, are you going to be willing to take a closer look at what matters to you most? Are you living true to your personal values, the values that you have implemented in your career? A lot of people have decided to make changes, some by force, some by choice. But I think it's an opportunity. And yes, we're living in very volatile times right now. We're nowhere near the end of the pandemic. Our world is in distress. And so, no crystal ball here. I'm hopeful that people like you and I and many others are supporting as many people as possible to realize that there really is opportunity here. And I know we both do a lot of inner work in support of our clients to help them really get into alignment with who they are organically, who they are naturally, and shed the interference that's getting in the way. And one of the things that is unique about my methodology is I also work a lot with retraining the mind, which is such a critical component as well.
Yes, my first 10 years out of my 28 years full-time experience in natural healing was all about healing the brain and the mind. So yes, we're in alignment about that. And in my book, Reading the Soul, I talk about a breakdown to a breakthrough. So sometimes when everything is literally falling apart and you're in that moment of you don't know what's going to happen next, it's almost like the bigger the breakdown, the more that things are clearing the way, even though it may seem very difficult.
Yes.
Now, Wendy Darling, many people feel overwhelmed by pressure. And often, as we talk about, when these breakdowns happen and people get sick and they lose their job and their children are learning differently and things are happening with their parents and their loved ones, many people feel so overwhelmed by pressure that they're literally unable to move forward. How do you motivate people who are already overwhelmed?
Yeah, I think this is where self-care comes in, to not expect too much of yourself for a while, to really give yourself time to take care of yourself. I'm blessed that I at least live in Southern California. We can go outside and get fresh air and go for walks. Even if you live in New England in the heart of winter, you can still bundle up and get outside. And I think that's a really important piece. Secondly, to do your best to get as much rest as possible. Work really hard to nourish your body with healthy foods. A lot of times under stress, there's just the opposite that can take place, where people want to soothe their emotions through foods that maybe don't support us as much. And then I'm a big believer in meditation. When I first learned how to meditate many years ago, that was like an oxymoron. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that, meaning quieting my mind was a complete oxymoron. And yet, because of the way that my healing gifts came to me, I actually sing. And when that started evolving, because I had a very serious accident 30 plus years ago. And that's when my healing gifts started to come to me and be cultivated. So if there's a way also for you to calm your mind and calm your body, that too is going to help. So I believe in taking tiny steps. Don't try to do too much. Be willing to take a step, and then be willing to take another little step. And eventually you are going to gain momentum. You will gain more clarity in that process, and it'll become easier. But I think a lot of people get immobilized because, like you said, they're overwhelmed. And I believe in chunking things down. Don't try to do it all. What's going to be your first priority? And I actually have a process called the Results Accelerator, where people are able to identify what their first action step, the area of their first action step is that accelerates their result. And it's very cool.
Fascinating. And, it's great that you're talking about this, Wendy Darling. In a recent interview for the Natural Healing Show, I interviewed an expert at overcoming trauma. And in her view, and certainly many of us who've lived through the pandemic have had a lot of trauma with all the changes that we've gone through. So in the view of the trauma expert, she said that self-care is absolutely essential for overcoming trauma. And in my work as a medical intuitive healer, what I see is that you are literally unable to make changes unless you have the internal energy, the personal chi, in order to do that. So
Sure.
Sometimes we have to cultivate our own chi and build our energy, and then you're going to have the energy to respond and to take the steps. We also talked about what you talked about, which is the principle of Kaizen, Kaizen. And Kizen is the art of making profound changes through small steps.
Right.
So, eating one less bite of food at lunch or dinner, taking one more step every day. Now, psychologist James Prochaska described the 5 stages of change. And in his view, the 5 stages of change are pre-contemplation, contemplation, planning, action, and maintenance. So in pre-contemplation, you're thinking about changing, but the cons of changing outweigh the pros. So maybe you want to lose weight, but you don't really want to go to the gym, and you don't want to stop eating key lime pie. In contemplation, the pros and cons of changing are about equal. It's like, okay, well, maybe I can only have key lime pie on the weekends, and instead of going to the gym, maybe I'll start walking. And then planning is when you come up with an actual plan to make the changes that you want. Okay, so I want to get a new job, so I'm going to hire a job coach, or I'm going to look every day on LinkedIn, or I'm going to rewrite my resume. And you come up with a plan to make the changes. And then there's action, which is when you're making the changes. I'm eating less key lime pie. I'm walking every day. I'm searching for a new job. And then finally, once you've made the change and taken the action, then you have to maintain it. You've achieved your ideal size and you've got to maintain it. You found your miraculous life and you've got to live it. Now, James Prochaska also talked about how different methods work at certain stages of change and not others. So for example, if somebody, maybe you're thinking about stopping smoking, but you're in pre-contemplation, you don't really want to stop smoking, and somebody gives you a plan, well, it's not going to work because you're not ready yet. You are an expert at change. In your opinion, Wendy Darling, why do different methods work at certain stages of change and not others?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it is a lot has to do with our past experiences and the way literally our brains are wired. So it's estimated that we have approximately 60,000 thoughts a day. And the majority of those thoughts are what we refer to as under the radar in your subconscious, meaning you're not even aware that you're having those thoughts. And the majority of those are also the same ones that you had yesterday. So my miraculous living method, excuse me, the miraculous living method does find places within you that's creating stuck points, creating interference. We're able to release it. But as I mentioned before, the critical component that's really kind of the cherry on top, so to speak, is that we work with your brain. So the brain is literally either strengthening neural pathways that are in alignment with what you're wanting to create and experience, or it's even possible that we're creating a new neural pathway. And so the beauty of this, because it is an energetic approach, it's a combination of sound healing, plus I have transformational healing cards that are a design, and they too hold a frequency and creates a very unique circuitry. And then I either receive downloads or we create a scenario for clients to use that, let's say, for example, you mentioned trauma. I too have worked with a fair amount of people that have experienced trauma. And so a very common statement is, I am safe. Well, if somebody says out loud, I am safe, but there's a whole lot of belief in the background that's going, what the heck are you talking about? Really, it rises to the surface. You may not be consciously aware that that background chatter is going on, but the system has a high level frequency, and so it melts away. So you're strengthening your conscious mind while rewiring. And actually, it's not like you eliminate a thought. It just loses its life force. It just doesn't really, it just doesn't really exist any longer. And so that allows for change to happen so much easier. That's why my clients get easier and faster results. That's why working with people with trauma, I feel so blessed that they can release this very quickly and they're freed from their past. And it allows people to move forward much more easily. The other thing that happens as well is that because there's a lack of interference, people can live more from their heart, and they can also dial up their intuition, which I refer to as your inner guidance system. This is, the messages that we receive that are always guiding us to live a healthy, happy, and prosperous life. And so this too gets dialed up. Because in my world, when you have this, when you have your inner guidance system really working for you and you're paying attention, and you take what I refer to as inspired action, meaning you don't necessarily go, woohoo, I get to do this, but you just know that that's going to move you forward. It's a beautiful way to live life. And that is living a miraculous life.
Your methods sound very similar to mine. And my first healing method I ever learned 28 years ago was actually brain gym. and you identify the limiting belief. So in my system, you would identify the limiting belief. You identify the emotion or emotions that's holding that limiting belief in place, the age or ages in which things maybe happen in your life that reinforce that limiting belief, and all other relevant factors. And then when I'm doing a healing, I'll look at what do you need to do, be, or have in order to release that. But again, I want to bring this back to the stages of change, because I think so many people do want to make a change, but they are not identifying which stage of change they're at. So again, the point is different methods work at different stages of change. So if someone's in pre-contemplation or contemplation, Wendy Darling, what is your method of getting them unstuck?
Yeah, first of all, I don't really look at people in terms of stages, but if somebody comes to me and they're not really clear, I have a process that I use to create clarity. We do what I refer to as a life vision, and then we also create a life mission. And there are 10 categories that we examine, but it's done in a very intuitive way because we use my transformational cards, and it helps to bring out the truth from within. And one of my gifts is I can hear when somebody's speaking truth, or it's coming from a should or a would have or a could have or whatever place. So I can hear the distinction as well. So it's really a process of just really getting to the root of their deepest desires, of how they want to be living their life. In my body of work, we look forward. We create the life that you want to be living. And then we close that gap from where they are to where they want to be. We don't have to go backwards. The process takes care of that.
I 100% agree. It's all about looking at what you need to move forward. Now, during all this times of stress and change, one of the things that we know, there's something called the Holmes and Ray stress scale. And anybody can look this up. You can look up on Wikipedia, the Holmes and Ray stress scale. And basically, when you have gone through a period of profound change in your life, you develop, you get points on this Holmes and Ray stress scale. So for example, a divorce or a death of a loved one are very high on this scale. Changing your job, personal injury, or personal illness. So these are all things, and one of the things I encourage my clients to do is to be aware of where you are on the Holmes and Ray stress scale, so that if you have gone through a period of huge stress and it's taxing you on every level, physically, energetically, emotionally, and mentally, you know that you need to put more resources in you, so that you can have more compassion for yourself and give yourself a little bit more leeway. So, and I think that so many people, with what we've just been lived through and continue to live through, their numbers are pretty high. So I think that we all have to give ourselves a pass and be compassionate to people around us. In your experience, Wendy Darling, how can we maintain our inner peace during times of change?
I think we've already addressed a lot of it. It really comes down to self-care. I think also, even though many of us are still not socializing a lot because of the pandemic, thank goodness for Zoom, and FaceTime, that at the very least we can connect. And I think reaching out and trying to have more connections, especially right now, becomes very important. So a lot of people tend to not want to reach out when they're feeling bad. And one of the things that I like to share is, and I'll even ask you this question, Catherine, how do you feel when you're supporting somebody that's going through a challenging time? How do you personally feel?
Well, one of the things that we know from research is that someone who helps another person actually likes that person more. So one of the
Yeah.
ways,
So,
Mhm. Yes,
so do you, I'm getting at, how do you feel? Do you feel good? Do you feel,
absolutely.
okay. So for those of you that maybe are hesitant in reaching out, why would you want to deprive someone else, your friend, your loved one, of that feeling? You know, if you can't find it within yourself, recognize that we really love supporting those people that matter to us. And one of the reasons why Catherine and I do what we do is because, okay, we do have some skills and gifts that we're able to contribute, but it really is so rewarding when we see that you're finally free of the things that have been bothering you, whether it be your health, your wealth, your love life, and you're living a happier, more fulfilling life. So I think it's just very important for us to make those kind of connections. And of course, the self-care aspect, it becomes even more critical. And by the way, we sometimes look at those stress scales as the negative, but getting married, having a baby, those kinds of things also. I remember years and years ago, it's been a long time ago because my son is now 36. And I was teaching stress management courses way back then. I used to do a lot of management and organizational development, consulting and training and development. And so my former husband actually wanted to take one of those stress tests. And he was like off the charts. You know, we had gotten married, he changed jobs, I was pregnant, you know, just we moved. And honestly, it was when I said, we're not doing these tests anymore, because now he was stressed when he saw how stressed he was. So I think it's really important to just take care of yourself. You know, if it means taking time out to read a book, or, you know, probably all of us are watching a little more TV than we used to, but to watch a happy show. You know, right now we just discovered Ted Lasso, and it's just an endearing show on Apple TV. And I try to suggest, and I live this way, I minimize the news. I still stay informed, but I don't get too caught up in it, because again, you want to be careful what you're feeding your mind and what you're feeding your heart. It's just not the physical food. We need to be aware of our environment and what we're choosing to bring in, whether it be people, whether it be sound and noise. We live in a very noisy time and world. It's just really important that you manage that and be kind to yourself. You know, if you're going through a difficult phase, cut yourself a whole lot of slack. Be kind to yourself.
Great suggestions. And you know, here at the Natural Healing Show, I interviewed someone recently on what you can do to prevent suicide. And one of her more surprising suggestions is, if you are concerned that someone is suicidal, ask the suicidal person to do something to help you. And by asking a person in great distress to do something to help you, you help them find meaning. You help them find their inner power. You help them recognize they make a difference, that their essence makes a difference,
Yes.
that they matter. Yeah. Yeah. And in my book, Reading the Soul, I talk about soul medicine. So just like here, the Natural Healing Show, we may talk about herbs that you take when your immune system's low. You can also build your energy by taking care of your soul. And what is soul medicine for one person may be different for someone else. For soul medicine for some person may be teaching yoga, or teaching painting classes, or taking children out, you know, to a park, or again, spending time in nature, laughter, dancing. all the things that you can't quite quantify, but make a big difference.
Yeah, I think a lot of people got pets during this period of time also. Pets can be wonderful nourishment for the heart and soul and can make a significant difference in people's lives.
Now, we've been living through the global pandemic for almost a year and a half, nearly 2 years. And no one, of course, really knows for certain what's going to happen and how long it's going to last. Are we going to be living through with this the rest of our lives? What do you think, Wendy Darling, the new normal is going to be?
Oh, I don't think we have any idea yet. And I don't know. As I mentioned before, we're at a very pivotal, volatile time. And it hurts my heart deeply that so many people, first of all, are struggling. It concerns me greatly how many people are angry and frustrated, and it's spewing out in very destructive ways. So I don't know if we know. It's been recently just a teeny tiny bit more positive lately, that at least here in the United States, our numbers have recently been starting to come down, but we still have a lot of people that don't seem to understand that if we just took a time out and we all wore masks, that there are simple things that we can do. I'm not talking about your choice of being vaccinated or not. Yes, I will. I know that it has helped many people. And I also respect the people that are choosing for whatever reason not to be vaccinated. However, if that's your choice, then be responsible that you're not infecting other people inadvertently. My mom is in a memory care facility. And just a couple of weeks ago, I had to transfer her to skilled nursing. And so I have a responsibility to really be careful that I don't inadvertently take something in there. And so the part that bothers me the most is kind of this attitude of rights being violated. I don't look at it as a rights issue. I look at it as a human responsibility issue. And I think if we could just put our personal values or whatever this is aside, I think it can help. I think we need to practice a lot more kindness and compassion. I know, and you probably do as well, the value of the energy of love, that we literally can fill ourselves up and we can spread it. The body of work that David Hawkins, who you're probably familiar with, he was able to create a scale that showed the different frequencies of emotion. Shame being one of the lowest, obviously anger and frustration are down there, sadness. And then love is one of the highest. And what I love about his conclusions is that if we are projecting love out, we can positively fill up those love wells that are low. They don't even have to know that it's happening. And so there are many days that I will sit in my office, I fill myself up, and I send love out to my neighborhood, to my city, my state, the country, the globe. And if more and more of us do that simple act, I have seen significant shifts in people just by doing that alone.
Great advice. And Dr. David Hawkins, author of Power versus Force, he wrote an endorsement for my first book.
Oh, nice.
So I published 10 books. He's now deceased. I'm more proud of his endorsement than any other endorsement. And what I find is that I think what our new normal is going to be is a greater awareness of our interconnection. And so, for example, yesterday, Facebook went down for 7 hours, I believe, and that affected people all over the world. Facebook was down, Instagram was down, WhatsApp was down, and we all take for granted our ability to communicate. I uh, I am 62 years old. I don't take any drugs, and yet I got vaccinated. And not only am I vaccinated, I'm participating in a vaccine trial, the
Mm,
Novavax vaccine. Because again, going back to what we think our new normal is going to be, I think that we are recognizing that every action that we take and that we don't take affects someone else on the planet, the earth itself. So, for example, during lockdowns, um, the air pollution cleared up in many cities, the waters
right,
got clearer. And part of the reason that I got vaccinated was what you were talking about, concern for other people, because at the time that I got vaccinated, they were talking about the new variants, including the Delta variant.
right.
And if I got sick, even if I survived the illness, I could potentially make 600 other people sick.
Right,
So that would be like, if I get sick, everybody in my neighborhood gets sick.
right.
And so those who and I've done healing work with countless people who've had COVID. It's absolutely horrible. You want to do whatever you have to do in order to not get it. um, Last week, I interviewed a fellow healer who had COVID. 7 months later, he spent $25,000 trying to get well, and he still has Bell's palsy. And this
Mm,
is someone who has access to traditional medical care, alternative medical care. He's worked with homeopaths, naturopaths, energy healers, and he's still sick.
yeah,
And
I know. Yeah, I'm sorry, go on.
so going back to what do we think our new normal is going to be? Again, I think it's going to be about really being more conscious about everything. When you make a purchase, for example, I've interviewed someone here on the Natural Healing Show who sells clothes on Poshmark. And many people don't understand that the clothing industry, the fashion industry, is one of the biggest polluters in the world, and up there with big oil. And so when we buy all these fast fashions, we're literally contributing to air pollution, water pollution, people we've never met are not being paid a living wage. And when you choose whether or not to be vaccinated, you may be affecting the health and well-being of everybody in your family
Yeah.
and people, again, in your neighborhood all over the place.
You know, yeah, one of the things I find interesting, first of all, science has evolved so significantly. A lot of people were very hesitant because the vaccines got developed, quote, quickly. But what can be identified today is significantly different than even 5 years ago. And, the other thing too is let's look at other times that vaccines really made a difference in the quality of life. The polio vaccine eradicated polio. Um, People weren't protesting at that time and saying you're violating my rights. I too got vaccinated. I followed the science. I'm not going to lie. I was a little, there was a little bit of skeptical aspect within me, but also I knew that so I was willing, let's say, to take the risk of some kind of adverse effect versus dying, being hospitalized and dying. And also, because I'm 70, and and as much as I'm in denial of that at times, and I'm blessed that I'm healthy and well, it's still a reality that I have to be very conscientious. And I would not want to feel any kind of responsibility, what we talked about before, of impacting other people. So I hope you're right. I think that that's the opportunity that we have. How many people are going to lean into that, where we become more conscientious, more conscious in what we do? It's to be determined. But I hope, we're now seeing a lot more reports of people that went, oh, I didn't want to get vaccinated, but then they got hospitalized and they were like, what was I thinking? And yes, there are a teeny, teeny, tiny number of people that get a little bit sicker, but now we're also even seeing cases, I've seen them personally, of people that are fully vaccinated and they're still getting COVID. So it's not necessarily that you're not going to get it. They've never said that that's the case. The difference is that your chances of getting really sick, having to be hospitalized and dying, that gets squashed. And so it's a to be continued.
I'm going to bring it back in our final thoughts to what we're talking about, which is the most surefire way to be happy in life is by meaning. And by finding meaning in your life, and by finding big or small ways to contribute to the well-being of others. And when we think about what the new normal is going to be, with all the information that we have about whether I'm, reselling my clothes or buying reselling clothes, or whether or not I'm spraying toxic chemicals in my garden, or whether I'm eating organic food, or how I'm treating others, or whether I'm wearing a mask when I go out to protect myself and others so I'm not spreading the disease. The way that you find meaning in life is what is going to help you become happier and happier. So, Wendy Darling, author of Create Your Miraculous Life, It's Never Too Late. You can find out more about Wendy Darling and her wonderful work at her website, wendydarling.com. You've been listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. And while you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. And remember, there's no one alive just like you. You matter. And as you discover your own divine destiny and make a difference in only the way that you can, you're going to become happier and happier. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.